Can you hear me?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the THEA Town Hall meeting, where we're going to be discussing the Education Freedom Scholarship Act that is being presented into the Tennessee legislature. I want to thank you so much for joining our discussion. Our goal tonight is to inform you, our viewers, with as much accurate information as possible as we, as individual parents, educators, elected and unelected officials, and the general public make profound decisions about the educational future of the children of the great state of Tennessee. These decisions affect the most valuable Tennessee resource, our children. No matter in which environment they learn, whether it's in a public, private, home, or micro school, each child is a gift who must be given the best possible and most appropriate opportunities to achieve during their K-12 lives and to prepare them to join the ranks of Tennessee citizens. We recognize there is much debate and many differing opinions about those learning opportunities, including school vouchers, the focus of tonight's discussion. Diversity of opinion about them exists within the greater education community and within the homeschool community as well. Some parents want to accept vouchers, others do not. We tonight on this call, as representatives of the Tennessee Home Education Association, we are educators and learners. We have diligently researched every published document that we could locate or access concerning the Education Freedom Scholarship Act. We have attended and spoken at legislative committee meetings, reviewed the recordings of those meetings as they are accessible, and met privately with numerous legislators. We wanted to learn. This panel discussion tonight represents the findings of our combined research efforts. Before I introduce the remaining members of the panel, I want to remind you that this meeting is an information-based, closed forum. We welcome your comments and questions in the chat. Even in the chat, remember that respect is vital in our discussion of important matters that we are facing. Be respectful of one another and especially of the valuable time we have. Everyone's voice is important and deserves to be heard. Please refrain from dominating the chat so that everyone's questions can be answered. Now, I want to introduce to you our esteemed guest. First, Kelli O'Conner. Kelli is married and is a homeschool mom of 2 little girls and lives in Sevier County, Tennessee. She founded the grassroots group Empowered Sevier in 2021 to encourage citizens to become active in local and state government. She is passionate about researching education-related public policy matters and networking with others who share her desire to preserve God-given constitutional freedoms. Dr. Eric Potter, welcome Eric, serves the Franklin area as the founder of Sanctuary Functional Medicine. He and his wife Jennifer, of 15 years, homeschool their 6 children, as well as collaborate on his research into the school choice movement. He is the creator of the Whole Person, Whole Life website and shares his detailed research about school choice there. So before we actually begin talking, I want to review the purpose of this meeting is to review 3 critical topics concerning the current Tennessee legislation that is before those bodies. We have been hearing questions from families contacting each one of us, and we felt that they fell into 3 separate categories, and we're going to discuss those separately. But we wanted you to know in advance what we would be talking about. So the first topic that we will be covering is understanding the Education Freedom Scholarship Act. We believe as educators, I personally as an educator believes that the most important thing you can do is understand something. So we will begin with that issue when our discussion begins. So you will have a foundation for what we've discovered as the most accurate information about the Act and the bills presented around it. Second, we will explore the school choice movement because what is happening in Tennessee did not happen in a vacuum. And we'll also be discussing the potential effects of these initiatives on homeschooling. So let's begin. Okay, I want to also refer you to the goal of this session is to delay action in order that the due diligence needs to be done by all the whole of the stakeholders in this very important mission. So with further ado, let's get started with our first question. We're going to begin understanding the Education Freedom Scholarship Act. And I'm going to turn to you, Kelli, because I have been really overwhelmed by the information that you have gathered.
Yeah, there is a lot to this legislation, and of course amendments are coming out and things are changing. But what we're going to focus on today is the facts, the black and white of the bill, because I think there is some confusion going on around here about what the bill means and what it's going to do for families. So the first thing I want to point out, the House and the Senate both have a bill, and those bills are both different, but they do have some similarities. So the first thing I want to talk about is that both bills will call for $20,000 or 20,000 scholarships total for the first year. To put that in perspective, we have around 1 million school-age children in Tennessee. So 1 million children between private, charter, and public and homeschools in the state of Tennessee. So that 20,000 scholarships that represents 2% of the children in the state. That's a super important distinction to make, to realize when we talk about the funding of this bill, that it's affecting just 20,000 children right now. The House bill has a plan to increase that year over year by no more than 20% each year. But the growth target in the Senate bill is a little bit unclear at this time. As far as how much money is designated for students, in the House bill, each child would get $7,075 maximum. And then in the Senate bill, they're basing the amount of the scholarship on the current THEA base funding model, which is around $6,500 to $7,000 per student. It's important to really understand, though, this doesn't mean families would get $7,000 per child. What this means is you have up to $7,000 to use for allowed expenses. And there is a list of expenses that are eligible. So tuition, educational materials, curriculum, uniforms, technology, educational therapy services are some of the things that are included in that. But it's important to really understand that all of these are subject to the Department of Education approval. And in the Senate bill specifically, it says it has to be pre-approved by the department. That means if you're thinking, well, I'm going to get a $7,000 check and I can use it how I see fit, I'm literally getting my tax dollars back. You're not really getting your tax dollars back. You're getting a credit that you could apply, but that is going to be a controlled choice of the government, how you can use those dollars. So we'll kind of go into that in a minute. For the homeschooling, who is eligible? In the House bill right now, homeschoolers under Category 4 are included. There is an amendment that has been put out that will be on the floor this week on Wednesday, that at the moment, I haven't heard from HSLDA, but it appears that it may work as far as removing Category 4 homeschoolers. However, the Senate version does not have that same amendment. The Senate version, actually, in their discussion last week, they talked about how Category 4 homeschoolers under an umbrella would be included in the bill. So there's a little disagreement between the House and the Senate on who should be eligible for this money. In the House bill, the money can only be used for private schools. And again, at the moment, until the amendment passes, it looks like Category 4 homeschools. In the Senate, it can be used for homeschool, private, charter, or public LEA. So you could actually go take your child to a different district, maybe the next county over, or charter schools. Charter schools and public schools under the Senate bill would be required to accept a student if they do have room for them in their facility. So this is the part, let's talk about accountability. What's this look like? As taxpayers, I think if we're playing devil's advocate, we want to know where our tax dollars are going, especially when there's public-private partnerships. And that way, I actually think that's why maybe we shouldn't have public funds in private schools. I want to read to you directly from HB 1183. It says the department shall contract with a third party for the third party to collect the data required regarding parental satisfaction with the program and academic performance indicators for recipients enrolled in a private school, and to report that data to the department for purposes of the report required in this section. So it's really important for families to know that under the House bill that is passed through subcommittee, children who accept the voucher dollars will be monitored by a third party company that is collecting data. And it says in the preceding paragraph, they shall report on the efficacy of the program. And then it says including but not limited to, and it lists several things that these reports could include. So
Kelli,
we don't really
is what we're seeing on the screen as well that's highlighted in red, is that coming from the actual bill that was posted online for everyone to see?
Yes, this is actually the language that has already passed out of subcommittee, that they would be using this third party to collect data on children. So I think we have a lot of concerns there, like who is this third party? Is there a contract? Is there a bid going to be going for that? Who will have access to your child's information. What information will they be gathering on children? So I think that's a very concerning point to point out. The other aspect of it is people say they want the bill to have no strings, but it talks about academic achievement indicators. And in the House committee last week, they did talk about they're still working details out, but they want some kind of testing component for accountability. So that's a big deal. Now in the Senate bill, they do say grades 3 through 11 have to take either a TCAP or a norm reference test, and then 12th graders would have to take the SAT or ACT.
Why would that, Eric, from your perspective, we are comparing here on this slide here, the two bills, in understanding these bills of this education freedom scholarship. What is your take on all that Kelli has told us? I find all of that just overwhelming information that was hard to dig up and, quite frankly, difficult to really fathom. How do you see that really being operational as far as the act is written now?
So as Kelli mentioned, we have two different bills. So we're trying to imagine what this may look like, because what actually comes out of the final legislator, should they choose to pass this, is going to look a mixture of those. But part of the difficulty in all this is not just what we see in that legislation, but actually how this is implemented. Whereas there's a slide that we can pull up there where it shows how the different schools are categorized. When you're looking at how the Department of Education oversees Category 4 schools, private schools, public schools, there is a complexity which, if anyone who has tried to understand how this all fits together, what it means for a homeschooling student who is part of any of these categories, you see a lot of lines going different directions. The one thing you can't even see is that pink at the top, the Department of Education, even has lines that goes and controls the far left, all the accrediting agencies. So when you have this legislation put out by our General Assembly, it has to be implemented. There's a fancy word called promulgation. Basically, it's how the General Assembly delegates certain authority to make rules that allow the practical day-to-day application of these. So those promulgated rules then apply to these accrediting agencies, to the schools that are under them, and then to the students, which would include both private school and homeschool students in Category 4 church-related schools. When you have that, all those things that you have looked at there in terms of what Kelli has pointed out, you have a lot of testing potential. You have, when you have tests, that's going to determine what curriculum are chosen by those schools. If there's a student in those schools, are you going to have different rules for that student versus a student who does not take those EFSA funds? So you're going to have a lot of opportunity for both the Department of Education, the accrediting agencies that they're overseeing, and the schools to try to sort out exactly what this looks like for the person who's going in, putting their child into one of these schools and determining, oh, am I going to be tested? Will I be tested if the student sitting next to my child is taking those funds? So we have a lot of questions that can't be answered. And as I sit in on the Senate Education Committee meeting and watch the House, none of these questions are yet answered, which is part of why we get back to the point of we need to delay. We need time to process through this because at this point we're seeing things that we don't agree with. And we want to make sure that this is the best for all students, as Brenda said earlier.
And in this, Eric, in your research, you have done a lot of deep dives into the whole subject of school choice, of which school vouchers is a small part in how it affects the homeschool community. And most people have not had the opportunity to really understand the whole school choice movement. And in that, the act that is in front of the Tennessee legislation now, the Education Freedom Scholarship Act, has not come about in a vacuum, but there is a lot of understanding that needs to happen. And I personally, as a home educator, would like to know a little bit more about where does this come from and what has been its 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 implementation historically and in the past.
So yeah, it's difficult to trace because you have a lot of different streams that are flowing together. But an easy way to look back to this is when we're looking at the school choice movement that is there present in the United States today. We can see there's a lot of big money. When I say big money, you're going to recognize the big names like Bill Gates is putting money into different foundations. The Koch brothers, Betsy DeVos and their business and working through different organizations. The founder of Netflix, can't remember his name right now, but I know he has donated a lot of money to groups like 50 Can, some of the groups that are active here in Tennessee, American Federation of Children, are very active in trying to get the school choice movement moving forward. They're behind then the voices like Corey DeAngelis. So when you're looking at this, you're seeing a lot of big money from outside our state who is influencing what's going on inside our state, trying to build grassroots movements, or at least it looks like that. Or for even example, just so people know, our commissioner of education currently was a fellow under 50 Can. 50 Can is one of the major national organizations who are trying to push school choice in 2030, 40, basically they want every state in our country to have school choice. When you look, I wrote about this in a lot more detail on my blog to kind of trace where this money is coming from, but then you can listen to some of the institutions like the Hoover Institute had the governor of Indiana speaking, who was a president of Purdue University prior to being governor. He helped push through the school choice movement there. And one of the big things behind that is social justice. So when you're hearing school choice, oh, it's a conservative movement, we're doing the best for the children, there's really some other things. There's other big names, big money, and there's a lot of outside of Tennessee voices that are trying to influence what's going on in our state, just like other states. So we want to make sure that we're doing what's best for our own children, children that belong to the parents rather than belonging to the state. Yes, we're all in the state, but really the first two people that the children belong to are their parents. So when you look at this, go ahead.
What I was going to say, because I was going to flip it over into Kelli's court for just a few minutes, because as researcher educators, we really want to have some data as to some of the outcomes of programs that have already been in place for a little while, just so that we know about those. And Kelli, I believe you might be able to speak to some of that in the context of where are we going? I think Tennesseans have the right to know and the importance to know what other states have experienced very objectively, because we want this to be objectively, knowing that people have wide varying views and high emotions about this. It's an incredibly important topic, and we want to back that up with some data in programs that have actually been put into place.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, we should I'll preface this statement with, I agree, the public school system is not working well for most children right now. When you have, I think about 28% literacy rate in the state of Tennessee, children aren't reading. They're not learning well in the public schools. Given that, just because there is a potential solution doesn't mean that it might be the right solution. I think that you see states like Arizona and Florida, and people say, well, they enacted school choice, so we should do it too. But you have to look, they've only been around a year or two, not really long enough to see what's fully going on. We're still learning what's in their regulations. How is it affecting homeschoolers? But we're not just talking to homeschoolers today. We're talking to private schoolers, public school families that want to maybe take their child and get a different educational opportunity for them. I will say right now, we do have school choice. You can choose to homeschool. You can choose to go to private school. Those choices don't always come without sacrifice. We make a sacrifice to homeschool our children. But what you're getting is you're not really getting school choice. You're getting controlled government choice. You're not going to be able to go to any school you want to. These schools are going to have to opt into the program. So if you think I'm going to get $7,000 to go to the school of your choice, not really. That school will have to sign up to participate. But let's talk about some specifics. We had a conversation about Louisiana.
Yes.
Louisiana has had school choice for at least about 10 years. And when they first started, they made the requirement that students would take the Louisiana state test. And so if a school, for example, a private school took that child in and they took the Louisiana state test, the other students in that private school would be taking a different test. Private schoolers do oftentimes take tests, just not state testing. It's a different kind of test, a norm referenced is what they would call it. So what they found after some time, it was really difficult to teach some children who took the voucher money to the state test, but then give other children a different test. And the children who took the state test weren't doing that well. It's because the standards were aligned to the state curriculum, whereas the norm reference test was more aligned to what they were typically using in the private schools. So what happened was over time, they decided the easy thing to do is give all the kids in a school that take voucher money the state test. And so kids that were not voucher recipients necessarily, but that were attending that school were then subject to the state test because it was easier for the school to do that. We have seen in West Virginia, they had a bill, they passed a school choice bill a few years ago. And then just last session, I believe it was 23 in the spring, the homeschoolers were upset by this bill. And they said that it'll mean regulations for all if you open this up for homeschoolers. And they said, no, we won't do that. If you want the money, you can take the requirements, but if you don't want the money, then you can just continue on as normal. And what happened was they did try to pass a bill that would make regulations come down harder on all homeschoolers, whether they took the money or not. Thankfully, they fought that bill. It did not get out of committee, but it is a threat to future freedoms with some of the school choice options that we have seen.
Okay, thank you. Eric, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, one of the things, as she mentioned, some of those examples, I've looked across those states and wrote on my blog, comparing some different states, especially looking at particularly at North Carolina, but we don't have a good history of seeing whether these school choice programs work in other states. It's a really mixed bag. I have to admit, in some places, kids do a little better, but then you have other children who actually score worse. So we're looking at spending over 100 million, at least in the first year, if not several hundred million over a few years. Arizona's getting close to $1 billion. North Carolina is planning 500 million a year in a few years for a program that we don't know if it works. And we have a 3-county pilot program in Tennessee. And other than, parents are satisfied that our children are in there, we don't have any data from that to know whether or not it's actually helping those children. We just have a lot of anecdotal data. So we're looking at an issue that we don't have good proof. We want to know before we pass a bill, which is why we're asking for the delay. And if all else fails, look at the Constitution of our state. It gives the legislator, our government, power over creating a public school system, a free public education system, but it does not give them jurisdiction or power in a private education system, which school choice does bring the government into the private educational world. And we would just think that is truly a bad idea and also not constitutional.
Okay, thank you for those final comments there. We're seeing tonight how the choices that are before us that are presented as we have documentation for the Education Freedom Scholarship Act here in Tennessee, that we believe are well motivated to help all the children in the state of Tennessee. And we believe that there are good solutions. We believe that finding those solutions does take time. So as representing the Tennessee Home Education Association, we would like to have a call to action for you. And is it possible to get that full screen? Thank you so much. There are two things we would like for you to do as a result of participating in our meeting tonight. First, if you would sign up for alerts. The job is not over, and we will continue to be vigilant in looking at all the information that comes in, that we will look at all the bills that are posted, all of the meetings that are held. So we will know and we will be able to alert you as to what information is happening. So if you would scan that CR code at the bottom left of your screen there, you'll be also sent comprehensive follow-up email about the contact information for legislators, links to some of the proposed bills, articles regarding school choice, a link for Eric's website, information that Kelli has been putting together, and other members of our community that are trying to find all the information that will help our state make the best decisions for our families. The second thing we would like to ask you to do is we would encourage you to call, email, or visit your senator and your representative, especially the members of the House and Senate Education subcommittees. And we would like you, we've had it there, we would like you to ask them to please delay action on the Senate bill, the House bill, and any other bills or amendments that are rapidly coming forward until we all have time to explore the implications, that we should do our due diligence in this matter and move forward so that we have the best for all the children in the state of Tennessee. We have amazing educators in every sector. There are amazing educators in the public sector, amazing educators in the private sector, and amazing sectors in the homeschool and microschool sector. Working together, listening to one another, we can certainly come up with the best and the most appropriate opportunities for all our children. And I'm just going to read what our conclusion is, our concluding statement as the Tennessee Home Education Association. We want to ensure that all children one another of Tennessee continue to enjoy the educational freedom and opportunities that Tennessee legislators have afforded us in the past, and we are very grateful. Our desire is to see this continue far into the future for our children and our grandchildren. Please stay in touch with all of us. I want to thank Kelli O'Conner for being with us and sharing her expertise. Eric Potter, Dr. Eric Potter, thank you so much for sharing just a very small tip of the wealth of information that you have collected. And from all of us from the Tennessee Home Education Association, we want to thank you for joining us tonight in this town hall meeting. Good night, and God bless you all.
Good night.